Hi, in this lecture we are going to learn what are the functions and stored procedures and why we use them. Up to now, we created some anonymous blocks. We had declare, begin, and end blocks. We do our jobs, then delete these codes when we finish with them. But most of the times, we do the same things over and over again. We may use the same thing for many times in a short time, or we may need to use the same block 1 year later again. We cannot remember the same code next year, isn't it? Or let's say we do the same thing over and over again in our block. Let's say checking the salary if it is in a valid range or not. Normally, we need to write this check block in all the places that we need. But this is not so good. This will cause so much unnecessary work and code crowd. We need to handle that bad issue. Now, let's continue talking on a code sample. Let's say we have a code like that. This code increases the salaries of every employee by 10%. Assume that we do that every year. How can we do that? File and save. But this is not the actual solution because we save it into another place than the database. The database cannot see the files in the operating system. Besides, a different user in a different machine will not be able to find the file and run. And besides, anyone who finds that file will be able to run easily. There will be no privilege restriction. So this is not good for many reasons. Now let's take another example. What is the difference here? We used a control statement in this code. We checked that if our new salary value is greater than our maximum salary limit, it raises an exception to the caller program. So there is a check here, but I hard-coded both check logic and maximum value here. But most of the times, these kind of common control logics are used by many developers. So this code may be used in tens or hundreds of places. What if our maximum salary limit changes? Assume that your boss says that our maximum salary limit is $30,000 anymore. What will we do then? Will we find all the codes that include salary check logic and change them all? This is not a good way. Actually, most probably you will not be able to find all the occurrences of that code. You will miss some of them and they will cause some errors in your programs. So this is not a good way. Or another thing. What if you will use the same things with different values? For example, in here, we did that in a loop and we increased the salaries of all the employees. What if we need to increase only 5 of them? Will we write another code for that? No. Let's turn back to our slide then. Maybe the most important part of programming is reusability. You need to use the same logic again and again in your business, and you need to run the same or similar code again and again. Storing into a file and using it later is not a good option, or writing the same text everywhere is not a good option too. Functions and procedures, also called as plsql subprograms, are created for reusability. We save the codes that we use for many times into the database instead of storing them into a file. Not only storing, functions and procedures have many different capabilities that you cannot do with an anonymous block. We will see all the areas of uses of functions and procedures. Actually, we used some built-in functions and procedures before. For example, count is a function or the put line is a procedure. We saw a lot of them before, but we will also see how we create our own functions and procedures in this subject. So what are the differences of anonymous blocks and subprograms? Actually, they are pretty similar, but there are some very important differences. The first and most important difference is they are stored into the database with names. So you can easily call these blocks with their names and use them easily. With this way, multiple users can use the same code again and again with getting from the same source. This also increases the maintenance. In our example, when the maximum salary limit changes, it will be enough to change from only one place, and all the others will now have the same value. So there will not be any conflicts with different programs. Besides, since you will call only its name, you will have much less text. You will be able to use 1,000 lines of code with one line in your blocks. Subprograms are stored as a compiled form. Actually, in plsql, every code must be compiled before running. So when you run an anonymous block, it is compiled and then executed. But subprograms are compiled once when you create or modify them, then they are directly executed when you call with their names. So you will have a performance gain here. They call anonymous blocks as anonymous because they don't have any names. We cannot call them from another subprogram, block, or application because they don't have any name to call or they aren't stored in the database. So they are invisible to the others. But on the other side, subprograms have names. We call them with their names and parameters if they have. And they are stored in the schema, so they are visible to the others. So we can call and use them from another block, subprogram, or application. But to do that, we need to have the required privilege, so they are safer than the anonymous blocks. The anonymous blocks cannot be called, so cannot return any value. But functions can return some values. For example, when we call the sum function, it adds all the values and returns us the sum of them. On the other hand, procedures can return some values with some different ways, but we will see that later. For now, we will know that functions can return values, but procedures don't. Maybe the most useful part of subprograms is taking parameters, so that we can do the similar things with different values. For example, in our salary increase example, we can send employee ID as a parameter and calculate a specific employee's salary. We generally use functions and procedures with parameters. For instance, we use some function with a column name. The column name is the parameter for this function. Great. Now we know that functions and procedures are called as subprograms and they are stored in the database for further use or using by multiple subprograms or applications. Besides, they have a better performance since they are compiled for once. But this does not mean that we will create all the codes as subprogram. To do that, we need to be sure that it will be used for many times. Besides, they have names, so you can run them inside of your code with their names. Also, they can take parameters and return some values. So you can avoid writing the similar code for many times. You simply change the parameter and it does the similar thing for some other values. This is the most important difference of functions and procedures than the anonymous blocks. Actually, the main idea of procedures and functions is reusability. I can save and use them whenever and wherever I need, even from a different application like Oracle Forms or Java, etc. In the next lectures, we will see how to create, use, modify, and remove the procedures and functions in details. So you will be able to understand much better on the examples. This is the end of this lecture. See you in the next one.